You know how we sometimes think of a great book or a big idea as being timeless, as if its meaning is just fixed, universal, and true forever? Well, today we're going to pull the curtain back on a really powerful theory that says, not so fast. We're going to get into historicism.
So here's the plan. First, we'll look at how meaning gets tangled up with time. Then, we'll get our hands dirty with something called the historicist's double lens. After that, we'll dive into the two big schools of thought, New Historicism and Cultural Materialism. And finally, we're going to see why this whole academic-sounding idea actually has a huge impact on the real world. All right, let's jump in.
So, to really get our heads around this, let's start with a story that probably a lot of you already know. I mean, really think about it for a second. When Charles Dickens was writing about this poor, sweet, innocent orphan, was he trying to tell us some universal truth about what it means to be a child? Or was he reacting to something very, very specific about his own time, the world of Victorian England? That question right there, that is our entry point into historicism. Okay, so here's the absolute core of it. Historicism says that meaning isn't something we just find lying around. It's something that is produced. It gets made by the language, the beliefs, and the power structures of a very specific moment in history. There are no universal truths just floating around in the ether. There are only truths that are built inside a certain context. And looking at this really shows you just how big of a deal this idea was. See, for a long, long time, the main way to read a book was through something called new criticism. And it treated a novel or a poem like this perfect, sealed-off object, a well-wrought urn, they called it. You were supposed to just analyze it and nothing else. But then historicism comes along and basically says, hold on, a book is not some pristine urn on a shelf. It's a piece of the messy, chaotic, complicated world that it came from. Okay, so if everything is all about context, how do you actually do this? How does this work in practice? Well, it turns out there's a really smart framework for it. Yeah, the critic Paul Hamilton really helps us out here. He makes it clear that historicism isn't just about gazing into the past. Nope, it's a method that has a very specific kind of two-part focus. And here it is, the two key moves. First, you look backward. You've got to put the text back into its own world, with all its own weird beliefs and rules. But then, and this is the part that's so crucial, you have to flip the lens around and look at yourself. You have to ask, wait a minute, how is my 21st century brain with all my own biases shaping how I'm even seeing this thing? It forces you to be self-aware. So let's bring this back to Oliver Twist. With that first lens, we're not just reading other novels from the period. No way. We're digging into court records, church sermons, maybe even economic reports from the 1830s to figure out what the word childhood even meant back then. Then, with lens number 2, we start questioning ourselves. Our modern ideas about children's rights and social safety nets completely change how we react to Oliver's story. A historicist gets really interested in the space between their world and ours. So in the 1980s, these ideas really started to catch fire and evolved into a huge movement, especially over in America. It was called New Historicism, and it was pretty much all orbiting one massive intellectual star. And that star was the French philosopher Michel Foucault. I mean, you literally cannot talk about modern historicism without talking about this guy. His ideas on history, power, and knowledge just turned the whole field upside down. Foucault basically handed the new historicists 3 game-changing tools. First, history isn't this smooth, straight line of progress. It's choppy. It has sudden breaks and radical shifts. Second, any moment in time, say the Renaissance, isn't some unified, happy picture. It's a messy battleground of competing ideas and voices. And third, and this might be the biggest one, power isn't just something a king or a president has. It's everywhere. It circulates through every conversation, every law, every book, and everywhere it's used, it's also being resisted. So what's the end result of all that? Well, new historicists just stopped drawing a neat line between a masterpiece, like a Shakespeare play, and, I don't know, a diary entry from a doctor or a government pamphlet on witchcraft from the same time period. To them, it's all just text. It's all circulating together in this complex web of power, and every single piece is an equally valid clue for understanding that culture. Now, at pretty much the exact same time, over in Britain, a similar but definitely distinct movement was bubbling up. It had a lot of the same interests, but it was drawing its inspiration from a totally different place. And this one was called cultural materialism. Its DNA comes more from the Marxist tradition, especially through the work of the incredible Welsh thinker Nayland Williams.
And because of that, it has a much sharper focus on things like class, money, and ideology. This table just lays out the differences so clearly. I mean, look, they both pop up in the 80s, but they have different intellectual heroes. Foucault for the Americans, Williams for the Brits. While New Historicism is often fascinated by these complex networks of power, cultural materialism zeroes right in on class and economics. But check out that last row. That's the real political difference. Newest sources can sometimes be a little pessimistic. They see a system where even acts of rebellion just end up getting absorbed and making the power structure even stronger. But cultural materialists are way more hopeful. They're actively looking for the fault lines, the cracks in the system, because they believe that by studying them, you can actually help bring about real social change.
So, after all that theory, we land on the biggest question of all. Why should anyone outside of a university English department care about any of this? I mean, what's the point? Well, here it is, in one word, to denaturalize things. The whole entire goal is to take an idea that we all think is just natural, God-given, obvious, ideas like family or justice or human nature, and to show that actually it has a history. It wasn't discovered, it was built. And make no mistake, this is not just some neutral academic game. As critics Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield put it right here, this whole approach has a commitment. It's a tool for figuring out how certain ideas came to be used to prop up systems that exploit people. And that right there, that is the most powerful and honestly the most hopeful takeaway from all of this. Because if an idea was made in history, well, that means it isn't some permanent law of the universe. It can be unmade. It can be questioned, it can be argued with, and in the end, it can be changed. History doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a toolbox. So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. Think about the things we believe so deeply right now, the ideas we just consider to be common sense. Which of those do you think future generations are going to look back on, kind of scratch their heads and ask, wow, how did they ever think that was natural?